Hello from the BBC World Service and welcome to the latest edition of the Documentary Podcast. If you have the time, please rate the documentary on your podcast app and leave us a comment. Let us know what you think.
Welcome to Telling Tales. I'm Penny Boreham. The power of ancient tales is that they never age. They connect us across time and space, across continents and creeds. In this BBC World Service series, Telling Tales, we are retelling some of those ancient stories from around the world and juxtaposing them with our contemporary experiences so that we can feel their resonances and connections and are reminded about how much we all have in common as human beings. Today, we're in Tanzania, in Matemwe, a small fishing village of thatched houses on a beautiful stretch of white sandy beach on the northeast coast of Zanzibar's main island. And we're here at Tamani Community School.
Wanafunzi hamjambo? Hamjambo. Sawa, asanteni sana. Kwa jina naitwa Teacher Makame. Karibuni.
My name is Makame Bakari Haji. I'm a teacher in Tamani School. We tell this story to the students twice or 3 times a week.
Teacher Makame certainly has the rapt attention of his class of primary pupils as he tells them this much-loved traditional tale, the story of the Sultan's son and the rich man's daughter.
Hapo zama za kale alikuwepo mfalme na jamaa tajiri. Mnamjua mfalme? Anakuwa vipi?
Once there was a sultan. He struck a great friendship with a rich man. The sultan had a son and the rich man had a daughter. One day the sultan told the rich man, "I think it is a good idea for my son to marry your daughter." They started making plans for the wedding. The sultan told the rich man, "I want us to make a wedding the like of which the people have never seen before." Everyone was invited and the wedding party was amazing. The din of the ngoma drums and the rejoicing was deafening. For 7 days, no one cooked at home. Everyone ate at the wedding banquet.
Zanzibar, although now part of Tanzania, has its own unique identity, influenced by African, Arab and Indian culture and its colonial history. In the 19th century, the islands were a base for traders and a hub for the region's slave and spice trades. This tale is originally Arabian, but has been retold in an African setting. Nowadays, over 90% of Zanzibar's population is Muslim, and the majority of the population speak Kiswahili.
Nguzo moja ya ndoa. Nguzo moja ya ndoa.
Makame, he's a very good storyteller. They really capture the kids when they say the story.
Storytelling has always been an important part of life in Zanzibar and was a useful tool for gaining the local community's trust when Tamani School first started, says founder Fatuma Somji.
The stories we are telling, it's our heritage. That was a very popular way of teaching them morals or getting a message through. So we used to use a lot of stories.
Alishine kwa muda mfupi, lakini ndani ya kipindi cha uharusi, ndani ya kipindi cha uharusi.
7 months after the wedding, the sultan's son summoned his servants and ordered them to dig a deep trench. He took his wife to see the trench and then seized her and pushed her in and left her there. The following day, the sultan's son came to check on his wife in the trench. He called out for the rich man's daughter. "Daughter of the rich man," she answered, "at your service." He said, "Aren't you dead yet?" And she answered, "I will not die until I bear you 3 children." The sultan's son roared with laughter and said to her, "How will you give birth to my children when you are there in the deep trench?" And he walked away.
My name is Mariam Mohammed Hamdani. I'm now 73, but I still enjoy reading stories which I was reading when I was a child. I heard this story about the Sultan's son marrying a rich man's daughter. That story showed us that in the old days, sultans have to marry people from the family of the sultans. This sultan had a friend, a very rich man, but not from the royal family. So the son was not happy to go and marry somebody not coming from the royal family. But because he had to please his father, so he agreed to marry this woman. But instead tried some trick to kill her. I'm a sultan. How can I marry somebody who is not coming from a sultan, even if she's rich? Now people care about money. But in those days, it was worst. Because, for example, an Arab can marry an African. But an African couldn't marry an Arab. You know, it was out of the question.
If you look at the Zanzibar culture, we have the Africans, we have the Indians, and we have the Arabs. I personally come from a background that is Indian, 5th generation, born and brought up in East Africa. So the Arabs and the Africans take a lot of two wives. And the Indians who live side by side, we work together, we do everything together. If our husbands do take another wife, it would be not very open knowledge. It's a secret. It's something our own communities don't look at favorably.
Back in our story, the Sultan's son checks on his wife for 7 days to see if she has died, and each time she always gives the same answer: "I will not die until I bear you 3 children." So he leaves her sacks of maize and some water and sets off on a long journey overseas.
Kwa bahati nzuri wakatokea panya. Wakatokea nini? Panya.
In the meantime, some big rats and mice came to the rich man's daughter in the trench. They asked her, "What are you doing here in this trench?" She told them, "My husband is the Sultan's son. I was married to him with the parents' consent. After 7 months, he pushed me into this trench for no reason except to kill me." The mice and the big rats said, "If we can get you out of here and back home, will you give us the sacks of millet and maize?" She readily agreed. So the mice and the big rats scratched and strained to dig a tunnel from the trench, which came up right under the mother's bed. When they had finished, they led her through the tunnel to her mother's house. When the daughter woke her mother, she was stunned. She said, "How did you get in when all doors are locked? What magic is this?"
When you were little, you know, it was the grandmothers who were telling stories. Most of the stories were about these genies, magicians, all these stories. Somebody was turned into a stone, somebody was turned into a snake, somebody was turned into a cow, whatever. Within there, they were teaching us. Be nice to the neighbor, be nice to each other. So they were teaching us all these stories, the meaning of them. So they were helping us, you know, at home, which is different from nowadays. People don't have time for their children.
Ilibidi huyu mama akamwambia mwanangu, usiwe na wasiwasi, usiwe na wasiwasi.
The rich man's daughter told her parents what her husband had done to her. When she heard that her husband had gone away, she said she wanted a ship to go after him. She said, "What I'm going to do to him will surpass what he has done to me. Find me a vessel and load it with rich cargo. But I will want the sailors all to be women dressed in black." The girl used her magic powers to find out where her husband had gone. She boarded the vessel with her all-women crew and sailed after her husband for 12 days.
The magical powers is again a very big part of the Zanzibari culture or the East African coast culture. And so that's why that is also used.
I think it's fascinating the way when she sets off on her quest, she says she needs a boat with all women oarsmen, all to be dressed in black. How would you read that?
I would read that because of the Islamic background of the story. Nothing should taint her reputation. If there were any men, the reputation would be tainted, and that's why she has asked for these things, so that nobody could ever touch her reputation. So people would say, but she came by boat for 12 days with guys on board, and so she is saving herself by taking on all women.
And is that why they're dressed in black?
Dressed in black is chaste, honourable.
As the sun sets over the Indian Ocean, the call to prayer from a multitude of minarets reverberates around the narrow streets in Zanzibar's stone town, a reminder of the island's strong Islamic heritage. Today, most women wear brightly coloured headscarves, but some are dressed in black burqas.
A lot is expected out of the women in terms of chastity and modesty, and there's a lot of pressure on the women just to feel accepted.
Huko anakuja mtoto wa mfalme, anataka uje umwozeshe mke.
Back in our story, we find that on the 6th day, the rich man's daughter catches up with her husband, but uses her magic powers to whip up a fierce storm so she can overtake him and get to Manga Komamanga before him.
When she arrived, she went to see the country's Sultan and explained her plan. She told him, "Just behind me there is someone heading this way and I have issues with him. When he gets here, he will want to marry. I want to pretend that I'm your daughter, and when he comes, tell him I am the only daughter you have and I have been married once. If this works, I will pay you 1,000 riyals." When the Sultan's son arrived, he went to see the Sultan of Manga to ask for his daughter's hand. Her magic powers meant that he did not recognize her as the wife he had pushed into the trench. The wedding was arranged. And after a year, the rich man's daughter gave birth to a daughter, and the father bought the baby gold jewelry. After 1 year, the Sultan's son asked his father-in-law, the Sultan of Manga Komanga, for permission to travel. The Sultan asked where he wanted to go. He said, "I want to go to a country called Mangapera." He handed his wife and child to the Sultan and left. So the rich man's daughter also set sail for Mangapera.
If she was poor, she would not have been able to take the boat and travel. A poor man's daughter would just submit to her fate. But money does have power. In this culture, they weave a net through marriage. My husband and I never met until our wedding. I was very young. I was 17 and he was 23. But with him I felt like this is a perfect choice because he was educated. I had my basic education. My in-laws were very liberal. So I didn't have that hard life. I had a husband who was very compatible also.
Do you now think, my goodness, that was so lucky? Or do you think your parents chose very well? Well, how do you see it?
I feel my parents chose very well. I'm glad I wasn't out there. I think at that age, you think this is the right match for me. And I'm sure at that time I wouldn't have seen my husband the way I did after I got married. Love grows, and it grew.
Kabla ya kufika huko, yule mwanamke akatangulia kishafika.
She spun her magic around the Sultan's son and again beat him to his destination. When she got there, she repeated what she did in Manga Komanga. She asked the Sultan of Mangapera to tell the Sultan's son that he had one daughter who had been married twice. If he so wished, he could marry her. He said, "I agree," and he married her, and after a year, his wife bore him a son, and he gave her some jewelry.
For men, there is the belief that my wealth is my children, because they believe that when the children grow up, then they can take care of them.
As a result, says Fatima, a woman's value is also determined by the number of children she bears her husband.
That's her value. It's how many children she has, you see. It's just a different way of seeing things.
Before long, the Sultan's son is off again, this time to the country of Manga Ndimu. And the rich man's daughter follows and uses her magic powers to trick him into marrying her again. And again she bears him a son, and he gives his wife some jewellery. After a while, the Sultan's son sets off for home, again leaving behind his wife and child.
But the rich man's daughter also left, and their paths crossed at sea. The woman passed each country to collect her children and eventually reached her hometown. Soon after, the Sultan's son arrived. There was great joy in town. The Sultan's son was back. The son told his father all about his travels, and the rich daughter explained to her parents all that she did. But she told them, "I have to go back to the trench, so when my husband comes, he will find me there." After resting, the Sultan's son went to the trench to see his wife. He called out to her, "Rich man's daughter? Rich man's daughter?" She replied, "Yes, sir." He asked her, "Are you still alive?" She replied, "I am still alive. Didn't I tell you that I won't die till I have borne you 3 children?" He told her, "Are you mad? How could you have my children? I have married 3 sultans' daughters and had children with them. You are going to stay in that hall." And he left.
The storyline is very familiar. We do see it in the culture, getting married and then not staying long enough or aspiring for something different. I think the story also is telling us through the story form of how the women are going through with this issue. So for the men, because they are the providers or they are the ones who are in powerful position, they take wives and leave wives when they want. But the woman is emotionally attached to him. She doesn't want to be left. Something happens and he'll say, "Oh, you need to just leave." Because the house is his, the children are his, and he will just kick her out. And it does emotionally affect them. With the school now, we see a lot of mothers who have been asked to just leave. And we can see the pain, they don't want to leave. And so the story is showing that what lengths a woman is ready to go to stay with the guy that she married.
Kiukweli kwanza watu walitoka sehemu tofauti.
The rich man's daughter then tells her parents to prepare a grand banquet and invite as many people as possible, as well as the Sultan and his son.
When the guests had eaten to their fill, the rich man's daughter brought her 3 children out. Each child was dressed in their country's traditional dress, bedecked with jewelry bought for them by their father. She told the children to go to their father, and they went to the Sultan's son. The rich daughter asked the Sultan's son, "Whose children are these?" The Sultan's son answered, "As far as I can tell, they seem to be mine." Each child was then asked, "Where were you born?" The first one answered, "I was born in Manga Komanga." The second one answered, "I was born in Manga Pera." The third one answered, "I was born in Mangandimu." The rich daughter asked them, "And who is your mother?" They all answered, "You."
It feels to me that there is a strong message in this story about women's informal power, which is something to be feared by men. The rich man's daughter may have been forced into a ditch by her husband in the public space, but in another sphere she is capable of making her mark with magic.
The story shows how the woman wanted to see her worth in his eyes through bearing children. So that's what I've perceived from the story, that she did whatever it took to get children from this one guy, because he had thrown her like garbage, and she wanted to show him, "I'm not garbage, I can bear children."
In your visualization of the story, that last scene when she's in the court and she brings the children out and she says, "Look, you're there wearing your jewels, these are your children," that's the pivotal moment, is it?
Oh yes, for sure, because then he couldn't deny that the children were his, number one. Number two, she had also her back covered. She knew that nobody could do anything. She had taken an all-women's crew on the boat and she was well covered. So it was a pure victory.
Walipokwisha kuzaa mtoto mmoja, akasema tena, "Mimi sikutaki tena. Wewe sikutaki tena."
The rich man's daughter said, "See, did I not tell you I would not die before having borne you 3 children?" The Sultan's son considered and said, Indeed, you have won, rich man's daughter. And they then lived together happily ever after.
Perhaps, like me, you find that a rather surprising conclusion to the story, after all the abuse the rich man's daughter suffered from the Sultan's son. But what, I wonder, do the children and their teacher make of it?
Nyingine hatutaki hii hadithi inatufunza nini? Tupendane. The first one said that we should love each other. Love is the pillar of the marriage.
The message of this story, she loves her husband and she doesn't like to be away from her husband. So that's why she didn't care what her husband done to her. She tried to find the other way that she ensured that she still lives with her husband and live together and have the children.
Do you think that she still loves him?
Exactly.
When I read the story, I understood that she was very angry to have been treated like that, and she was in a way trying to get what she wanted. It was almost surprising to me at the end, though. I thought she was getting revenge, but at the end it says they lived happily ever after. That was surprising to me.
This is like an imaginary story, not true stories, but it gives the message to the people in society. He didn't love her, but by the end of the story, he loved her because he thought that this has been a very important person, that now she has my 3 babies.
But Mariam Mohammed Hamdani takes a very different message from the story of the Sultan's son and the rich man's daughter.
As for me, I would have said, no, you can now go to hell. I will stay with my children, and then I'll find somebody who will respect me. Not somebody who already put me in a ditch to kill me. I wouldn't have gone back to her.
So you wouldn't have done that, but do you think in the story, the reason she's doing it is because she loves him?
In the story, because stories wanted to show us that in the old days, women, when they are married, they have to stick to their husbands.
So if you were retelling the story now, you might give it a different ending.
Of course, I would have given it a different ending. I would have told them that, you shouldn't agree to be ill-treated by men. If the men are so stupid and, they can't treat women as women, just leave them.
And Mariam practices what she preaches. She herself has been married no fewer than 4 times.
The first one was an army man, but we couldn't get on because the army people, all the time you move from here, and I know I can't. He was a good man, but I just couldn't cope.
Was that your first marriage?
Yeah, and then I was married to a minister, and I lived in my own house. He had another wives in their house, and then I told him, listen, I'm not a cow. You can go and take your wives and keep them in this shed. Why should I stay with the other women? I'm not used to that. So I'm leaving. And I never went back. The third husband was from Mombasa. He was a very good man. But later, after 4 years, then I realized that he wanted to use me. He thought that I love him so much. I'll just agree. But he didn't realize that, of course, I loved him, I like him, but I can leave him any time.
And you did?
Yeah, you did. Of course, I told him, you go to hell. I also married a musician, but he was a drunkard. I thought that he will stop. Then I say, okay, you can go to hell. And when you leave somebody, you leave. It's like vomiting. You vomit, don't take the vomit and come and drink it back.
Zanzibar's high divorce rate is a reflection of rapid changes in society, says Fatuma Somji.
With globalization coming so fast, there's been a drastic change. Our marriages, the pivot was not the husband. It was the family, the extended family. And if you had your husband doting on you, that was a plus. Less divorces happen because you found your fulfillment or your worth in the extended family, even if your husband was not there. Now it's one-to-one. We can discuss matters. We are equals in everything. And so it's very different. And the pivot is the love and everything that goes with it.
To your mind, is that a good change?
Yes and no. with nuclear families and everything that has happened, there is less tolerance. There's a lot of communication skills that we had at that time, conflict resolution skills, and all of that were being exercised. Now, theoretically, then everybody knows everything. But when it comes to tolerance, it's just this much I can take, and I cannot take anything more. This is my perspective. I don't see them using the love pivot to be able to have very strong relationships.
The rate of divorce here in Zanzibar is very high compared to many, many countries, because the mentality is just women is nothing. They don't follow the teachings of Quran, the teaching of Islam. And it is the duty of the sheikhs now to educate these people. I think these men, this is very difficult for them to change because of the way they were brought up. The society has brought up them. The only thing what we have to learn is we have to make sure that we teach our daughter to be very strong.
You've been listening to an episode of Telling Tales, a series in which we hear ancient stories from around the world and explore their reverberations in modern times. The Swahili story was recounted by teacher Makame Bakari Haji, and the English translation was read by Peter Musembi. The music was by the Zanzibari Tarab bands Culture Club and Tausi. The presenter was me, Penny Boreham, and this is a Ruth Evans production for the BBC World Service. And you can download all the episodes of Telling Tales from the BBC World Service website.
Thanks for listening. We'll have more for you soon, and please do subscribe. The documentary is just one of our BBC World Service podcasts. There are many others to choose from. Why not try People Fixing the World with brilliant solutions to the world's problems?
From the start, they were absolutely committed to making a strong medical case. They collected data, experimented with different strategies and improved how they worked based on the latest research. And all of this came together into something called the Pathway Model, which is a kind of flexible blueprint for how to set up specialist teams for homeless people in a hospital.
And to listen to People Fixing the World, just search for it wherever you access your podcasts.